Welcome to the It's All Fine and Dangy podcast, where hosts Dan and Angie talk with creatives, small business owners, charities, and all kinds of interesting people. It's all real talk. It's all fine and dangy.
Keeping it hot all the way to the table. Yeah, no reheating. Yeah.
That's where you almost have to have it undercooked when you take it off. Well, their plates are cooked. That's what keeps it cooking for them.
Yeah, they put it right in the oven. Well, anyway, guys, welcome to the show. We're going to get right into it. We've been chit-chatting a little bit here beforehand, figuring out some technology stuff going on.
Okay, just say it.
It's just a disaster. It's always something, with technology. But we are privileged to have Kyle Becker here, Commissioner-elect, in studio today. And we're going to talk about some interesting stuff, things that I'm really interested in. And I think
too.
A lot of our listeners will be, too, because we have a lot of small businesses, business owners that listen. And so we're going to be kind of chatting about the economic development of the Apopka area as well as business growth from his perspective, from a city perspective.
Sure.
Because, we always look at it from, we're just like, oh, why are they putting that? Why do we need another one of those? We don't need that there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then we want something different. So this is going to be cool to kind of dive into this and just get your point of view on this, Kyle.
Yeah, so welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. And you said this is your first podcast. We feel so special when people say it's their first podcast. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's first podcast. I have done radio. I've done some television, but first podcast, and so I'm excited.
Well, it's a whole nother level. This is way beyond radio and television.
I mean, the bar is set very high here.
You're on a community podcast now. You're going to have to hide when you're in public.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of get into when it does come to the growth of Apopka and your position on city council is what we call it, right?
Yes.
I'm getting all of that right. What is your role as far as it comes to helping build or help to grow the community? Let me get my words out here.
And I think my role, well, first and foremost, I mean, our city council, the Apopka City Council, it's made up of 5 elected officials, our mayor, and then 4 city commissioners. And the city commissioners are at large, meaning we don't represent a certain district or a part of the city. We are at large. We serve all of the residents of Apopka. And you said the word correctly. Apopka is growing. I mean, the growth in Apopka has been one of the fastest growing areas in the Central Florida area. And it's the population has actually doubled since 2000.
I think I read that somewhere. It's doubled in growth since, I think 2000 is what I read.
Because geographically, it's huge.
So geographically, we're the second largest in Orange County behind the city of Orlando. So we're 35 square miles.
People don't realize how big Apopka is.
It's 36,000 acres or something. Think about it like that, right?
So I grew up in Altamont. Altamont is 9 square miles.
They're giving you some perspective,
to give you some perspective. And when you think about Altamont, you think it's fairly big, right?
Yeah.
But it's 9 square miles.
Right.
Apopka's 35 square miles.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's very large, and a lot of that land is still green space right now.
Yeah.
So we attract the attention of a lot of developers right now. We have for the last 15 years, especially around single-family homes.
Yes.
It's been a very large residential boom. And so as you have more residents come in, then businesses start to say, okay, there's an area of demand.
Yeah.
And depending on what that demand is, you can attract certain types of businesses to come to the city. But first and foremost, my job as a commissioner is really to represent the needs of our residents first and foremost. So that's your most basic thing. So, public safety, public works, sanitation, making sure everything's clean and healthy for a resident. And then above that, it's making sure that there's opportunities for our residents to frequent or patronize the businesses that come here and want to thrive.
Yeah. So we talk about a lot of that green space and developers coming in and putting in these single family homes. So we're getting more families or getting, just more people in the area. What type of businesses are attracted to areas like that?
Yeah. And to take a step back, what really drives what a business can do when they come to the city of Apopka, we've got our guiding documents that guide city council. The highest ranking document would be your comprehensive plan. That basically tells people where they can do certain things. Hey, I'm a developer, I can build residential in this area. Or if I'm a new commercial business, I can build commercial in these areas. So those have your future land use maps.
Zoning type.
Yeah, your land use and zoning areas. Then what we have is our land development code. So once say a brick and mortar type of business wants to open up, what does it need to look like? Because the aesthetics in Apopka might be completely different than the requirements in, say, City of Orlando. And so those two things really guide what, where they can do things and what it needs to look like. And then it's really up to us to sell the vision of what we're trying to do in the city of Apopka. Because, when you think about why, especially employment centers or large companies go into a certain area, a lot of times people think that, it's, they can contemplate a tax rate or something like that first, but it's really not about that. It's really what quality of life things are there. My employees would be able to do as they're living and interacting in Apopka.
Okay.
What does my talent base look like? Is there a lot of talent to be able to staff my business if I were to go there? And then they obviously want to go to a place that's going to have a lot of people to make their business thrive.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, a lot of times we talk rooftops, so the amount of households a city might have, people, daily vehicle counts on major roadways and things like that all go into how people assess markets that they want to go into.
Oh, wow. See, and you don't think about this, like that all that work goes into it. You know?
So in the firm I was telling you I work for in my day job, we do transportation is one of the engineering. So we're talking about counting cars, we do that. We do traffic patterns. We do to help sort of predict development. But I'm curious, kind of along the lines of what Angie asked, but are there certain types of businesses specifically? I know development of houses is one thing, but it's almost reciprocal, right? Once there's houses, then there's residents, then the big companies come or maybe not big, but the companies come because there's a good workforce there. Then more people come because they want to work for that company. Is there a certain trend in the types of companies or the types of businesses?
Yeah, I mean, there is. But in terms of what people are wanting in the city of Apopka, I think you hear the same things. A lot of repetitive nature around sit-down restaurants and things like that. In terms of large employment centers within the city of Apopka, we've got, and now they just went through a name change. It used to be CenturyLink over there by.
Oh, yes. It's by Hobby Lobby.
Yeah. They had a large employment. The city of Apopka has a large employment base. But what we're really trying to drive is a lot of the live, work, and play kind of businesses that are here. So
there's stuff we want to see as residents, right?
Because when you think about it, the city of Apopka has historically been what they label a bedroom community.
Yeah.
For Orlando, meaning people have their houses here. They commute into Orlando in the morning. They come back in the evening.
They're getting out of all the hustle and bustle.
Right. But if you think about that, when they come home from work, they don't really want to go back out.
Yeah.
They want to have some options close to home.
Sure.
And it's even more prevalent now with the cost of gasoline. Some of the road construction that you've seen on some of these roadways that cause even more congestion. So once you get back into the city that you live in, it's nice to have all of those kind of creature comforts all in at home.
More like having like shopping and restaurants in the burbs versus having to go into a city. So I have been in Apopka for almost 51 years. I was born in the Apopka Hospital. I have seen the changes from, woods we used to play in as kids that, as a kid living out by Rock Springs, we had that challenge where growing up, being a teenager, I used to make the joke that you had to pack lunch to go buy lunch because there was no anywhere near you. We had to go to a grocery store that was, 20 solid minutes away at least, which doesn't sound like much, but most people it's 5, and now it is 5 because they've built the Publix out there.
Yeah, they've, and it's so funny because my aunt moved to Apopka.
Now.
Yeah, my aunt moved to Apopka. She lived in Painesville-Wekiva. This was probably back in the 90s, and that's when the first Publix was built right there at Welch and Rock Springs.
That's what
I thought to myself, what on earth is a Publix out here in the middle of nowhere? Because at the time there wasn't much around there.
They had the foresight though.
Well, the same thing.
Growth, right?
The Publix up at Kelly Park, same thing.
Yep.
They know from a planning perspective what's in our backlog, what's coming down. And so they've got in front of it. They've built their location. They're already starting to get a lot of traffic from the existing, but there's a whole lot coming there.
Because there's neighborhoods going on either side of them, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time, please let some restaurants come in. And they didn't at the time, but they have since then over there.
And to go back to your other question, really what businesses are coming here, and really you kind of have to highlight the businesses that were prevalent before that too, right? Because, Apopka, has the moniker, the indoor foliage capital of the world. It was
Fox's
huge.
Nursery was my parents.
Huge agricultural roots, right? But what happened is that, like any other business, M&A occurred. There was some mergers, there was some acquisitions, there was ones that just frankly went out of business. And so you've seen some kind of a trite, or you've seen some attrition in that space.
Sure.
But what that's now bringing in is some of this green spaces and turning into our industrial area. So if you look at the western side of our border,
That was one of my questions. Yeah.
over by the 429, where you see Goya, Coca-Cola, Amazon. Universal's doing a large laundry facility on that property. And then as you're going out west to the airport, you've got a whole bunch of industrial space. Because if you think about it, you've got that major roadway, the Apopka or the Wekiva Parkway, that's now connecting major highway systems. So I-4, 417, et cetera.
So easy travel for those larger companies. I'm curious how, because that was one of my questions, like all that kind of industrial area, because like you said, it's commercial property, right? So a commercial business has to come in.
Yeah. In fact, that piece of property just west of the airport, they did a study under Mayor Land back in the early 2000s to study that area, to say what truly are we desiring to go into this location. And back then it was light industrial or industrial. A few years ago, while I was still on council, there was the developer that owns that piece of property was considering doing a residential development, a residential mixed use development. And this is one of those scenarios where, this starts to impact people. Changing a zoning classification from industrial to residential, naturally the owners that have, hangars and condos out there at the airport were concerned because, the airport's been there for many years. However, if new residents come in, what's to say that they're not going to start registering noise complaints and have to impact operations from that airport?
Yeah,
and
does it also change airspace laws around them?
Yeah, and so you have to consider those things. And, thankfully it didn't get to the point where we actually had to have any public hearing on it. The developer decided, it's better used for industrial, for their industrial play. So that's what it's remained, and that's what's currently being developed out there right now.
So I have a question. So when you are trying to get businesses to come into your area, as the city, are you reaching out to businesses that you feel like would be a good fit? Or are people, I'm sure there's people that come and find you too because they see the growth in the area, but from that perspective of this is kind of what we want in our city, are you reaching out to the companies that you feel like would be a good fit? Yeah,
and let me say it this way, because before the show started, I didn't want to get into political speak, right?
Yeah. Sure.
And so I'm going to take this as plain vanilla answers as I can, but still get the point across, right?
Yeah.
So it's always best, as with anything, to be very proactive about what you want, because when you are proactive and play offense, you're going to more than likely get what you desire.
Yeah.
Versus playing a little bit of defense, you just kind of wait to come what comes, and those are the times where you get what you get.
Yeah, true.
So I'll talk a little bit theoretically. So our city currently has a community development department. So if someone's coming into our city, like we were talking about before, wants to examine our comprehensive plan, our land development code, make an application to do permit or large scale projects, they would interface with our community development department and have that dialogue. But in terms of outbound marketing, where you have really economic development focused positions, we don't have that by name in the city of Apopka.
Okay.
Other cities do. If you look at Winter Garden, they've got an economic development program, Mount Dora, Sanford.
Yep.
So all
We're
of these
super familiar with those cities,
And so
especially the first two,
and so all of these locations that have them, there's proven success there, and you see what that investment can then stand to return. A statistic I was looking, just because I like to geek out on some of these data numbers, but when you look at retail sales per capita within the city of Apopka, it's one of the lowest. When I do my compares, I always like to compare against Winter Garden, Ocoee, because those are our kind of nearest neighbors in Northwest Orange County. Altamont Springs, Sanford, and I just threw Winter Park in there for the sake of comparing to their city, but we're by far the lowest. You look at some place like City of Altamont, it's like 42,000 per capita. You look at City of Apopka, it's 15,000. Like is
that something that you guys are striving to change? I mean,
well, what I'm saying is that when we all talk about those things about shopping and dining.
Right, and we all do.
Those two things go directly into that number because it's retail and food sales that go into that retail sales number.
Right, and I don't want to put you on the spot. I really don't. But,
Go for it.
But because I don't know, I don't know that this is in planning or in your power or whatever. But as an Apopkan, all these years, we have wished for more dining, wished for more. Little shops of there's been sort of an uptick now in like cool little coffee shops in town. And there's a brewery in town now, and we love that. It's becoming like a trendy little space. And some of these areas that, for as long as I can remember, were kind of just sitting there stagnant. So I just wonder if there's more drive to do that, because even in those places that we've seen, they're very busy now. Like we go almost every weekend, and they're very busy. They're booming.
Well, I mean, there's another great cause and effect story, right? Because in the city of Apopka, I mean, heck, even up, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Apopka still had blue laws around alcohol sales.
I totally remember.
You couldn't buy it on Sunday.
Drive out of town and drive right back in.
Yeah, you could go 100 feet down the road into Orange County and get it, but you couldn't in Apopka. So as part of this,
ABC on 441.
but we changed the alcohol ordinance about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
Because really, when you read it to a T, downtown, you wouldn't be able to have an establishment that serves an alcoholic beverage within, I think at the time it was like 250 feet of a government-owned facility, school, or a church.
Oh.
So if you think about downtown Apopka, you're running into that every corner.
So it restricts your economic growth, all in all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was a contentious vote. That was a 3-2 to vote.
I'm sure it was. Yes. I've been here for a long time.
And so what that allowed, that paved the way for, let's say, Three Odd Guys Brewing.
Yes.
Three Odd Guys Brewing is there. They're thriving, doing a fantastic job. Propagate Social House.
That's the two I was talking about, that exact strip.
That coffee shop. But what's unique about those places is that they're doing unique things.
Yes.
And so that's why it's always important to try to attract people that have their own unique stamp about their business model, how they go to market. Yeah. Because I remember saying to myself, and I probably said it out loud to many people and since then, but when you hear about Propagate, okay, they're a coffee shop. Okay, cool. They also do like brunch and wine and stuff. Okay, great. Wine, coffee. And then they sell plants.
Yeah.
How Apopka is that?
Right.
Like that's
perfect.
the most Apopka thing that you can think of.
It really is. I mean, that is just a brilliant move on their part.
Yeah.
I mean, foliage. Did I say it right?
Foliage.
Foliage. I think it's foliage.
That's like the five different ways you can say New Orleans. New Orleans.
I say foliage.
She says foliage, and I say foliage, which is also wrong. But yeah, we've had them on the show, and they told us all about how they started up, and it's just I think that may be how we found out about them. But had we been before that? I don't remember.
I don't remember. I think we heard it just through one of our, just somebody posted it, and I'm like, what is this new place? Like, there's always some place in your backyard, you know what I mean, that you discover because somebody does a nice little social media post about it, and you're like, okay, we're going there. We're going there.
And that's the thing, right, is we've got to be very purposeful in how we advertise our businesses too. Yeah. Because, again, serving in government, you hear that a lot. It's like, well, I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle, not just in government, it's businesses in general trying to market to a particular client base. Okay, how do you prefer to get information? Is it through email? Is it website? Is it social media? I mean, what is that magic bullet in terms of communicating with the people that you intend to? And
well, it's got to be
a challenge.
Every demographic's different, right?
Oh,
like
of course.
You advertise to my mom on social media, she's not going to see it, right? So you have to slice up your advertising.
Exactly.
So
word of mouth a lot in Apopka.
Yeah. But I was thinking too, how I was just telling you before, I don't know how anything works, like when it comes to how does the city, get business. I don't know any of this. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't. You might have a vague idea of how it works, but how do we as just citizens, Apopkins?
I say Apopkins, I don't know.
If you want more of this kind of business or that kind of business, do you send an email? Like, what do you do to kind of say, hey, here's kind of what we would love to see as citizens in this community?
That's a great question. Like, how do you get feedback?
How do you get feedback?
Yeah, I mean, and there's probably a few different channels that you can go to as a resident. Obviously, there's natural things within any given city as it relates strictly to business. First and foremost, you have a government. Now, if we had a full-blown economic development program, that might be the right avenue, right channel. We also have, like many different areas, have a chamber of commerce that is a resource for business that are here within the city of Apopka. Obviously, if there's a specific brand that you want that to come to our city, it's always good to interact with them. I won't name names just because, but put it this way, a large commercial retail restaurant chain that everybody, is the first to mention when they want to come here. I went on a letter writing spree to them, to try and get audience with them. And finally I sent certified mail to their whole C-suite, their entire executive team.
Is this recently? I'm just trying to.
This was probably 4 years ago now.
Okay.
So their head of real estate finally called me back and said, "Hey, give me your elevator pitch." I had just picked up one of my daughters from school. I'm literally in my truck driving back to my house,
I love it.
And she's like, tell me why I should be out there. Tell me why I should come to Apopka. And so I did my little 20-second spiel. And this was right around the time.
You always have that right in your pocket, don't you?
It was right around the time that we had approved plans for the second new hotel in Apopka behind the Hilton Garden Inn, the first being the first. And, of course, restaurant chains see hotels as a very valuable asset because it's demand, and especially with a brand that they're familiar with.
Right.
So they ended up coming with their ground lease person. I did a presentation to them at City Hall, and going back to why they would select a city like ours, they have two major statistics that they look at: is the trade population, what's the population in the zip codes that are in that immediate area, and then daily vehicle count. And so within the city of Apopka currently, that limits you, right? Daily vehicle count, because areas like Kelly Park Crossing or down by the hospital, they don't really have the vehicle count yet to support some of that stuff. Your main corridors around 436 and 441 are going to be your kind of limited spots, but they need that. And it can't be a one and done thing because that may not have been the right decision maker for that particular brand. And so if the more that you say, okay, here's what's coming, and then really, really paint the valuable assets that we have in Apopka, because Apopka is known for its natural beauty as well. I mean, we've got the Lake Apopka Wildlife Drive that's very successful. Yeah. You've got the Kelly Park, the springs, Rock Springs at Kelly Park. So we've got a lot of natural environments. Camp Weewaw, that was just acquired by the city last year.
Yes, I was excited for that.
That's a 70-acre piece of preservation right there. Yep. So, you got to build the reasons why people want to come to the city of Apopka. And, it's funny, when I first ran for office 6 years ago, I was sitting in the waiting room at the Orlando Regional Realtors Association, and they've got their little books highlighting Orlando. And within the book, you flip the pages, and then they highlight all the different sub-cities around Orlando. So highlighting Winter Park and Park Avenue, highlighting Winter Garden and Plant Street and all that sort of stuff. Apopka wasn't in there. And
I know.
It pained me.
I know, because that's the thing. Like, we love Winter Garden, right? Yeah. You love those little places where you can just walk and you're going to hit the different shops and the restaurants. And I would love to see, I'm sure you would too. I'm sure that's in the brain. You're like, it needs to be like that, because we're so close to as well. It would be a great touristy little suburb of Orlando. Right?
I won't say the T word of tourist. That might turn some people off in Apopka, but I'm kidding.
We have them anyway. And to piggyback on all of this, I don't know anything about the development. I do wonder if an economic development plan is on the burner or is something that's being pushed for in Apopka.
So when we say plan, actually, this predates me by about a year on council, but the prior mayor to Mayor Nelson, Mayor Kilsheimer, they had put together a document called the vision document. And basically what they did kind of a roadshow of sorts and did little listening sessions around the entire city of Apopka of what residents really wanted our city to look like. Yeah. And so that's memorialized into this kind of growth plan. It's not an official document.
Is it part of the downtown? I remember seeing a sketch of downtown where it was
there's a downtown overlay section of that. Now, the downtown area has morphed. Each year you get a different kind of design of
iteration,
what that's going to exactly. And that's been the case for the past 15 years. I think even under Mayor Land, there was that desire. That's why he acquired that land. I forget when he acquired it, but it was, I think, in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s.
So it's just been recycling this sort of different plans. That's standard building process.
But at the end of the day, I think and this is, if you read the history books of Apopka, I mean, they've tried to revitalize the downtown commercial core since the 70s, and it really hasn't materialized. And I think, and that's a testament to, again, places like 3 Odd Guys or Propagate, because it's giving purpose for people to come back down intentionally to downtown area to go to those places. And if we can multiply that, it's almost like, dead coral reef, right? You drill a hole in it, you plant in something that's thriving again, and it rebuilds the
whole thing back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because downtown Apopka in my brain is largely a place you're going to stop and get like a drive-through and stuff before. Now places are spouting up that you're going to hang out for a while and just really enjoy the downtown area. But, I wonder, and again, I don't know anything about development, but I think of like Winter Garden, and there's not that much traffic in Winter Garden, so it has to have something to do with their economic development plan. I mean, there's not
as far as
like a major chain coming in and counting cars and all that. And I think we talked to someone down there that's involved in that, and they don't, they have restrictions on big brands coming in there. They want it to be a little more mom and pop. But back to growing up in Apopka, I remember thinking, and again, my expertise is that I like to eat, but like across...
Don't we all?
There was rumor a while back, and I'm talking 20, 30 years ago back, that across from Publix, after they built it, that the Darden restaurants were looking in that area, and that we were like, and to this day, I think if there was an Outback there, there'd be a line out the door. Like there'd be a 2-hour wait. So there's certainly demand for some of these things. I just don't know if all of the community is ready to embrace it, or is there some of the community that is resistant to that kind of stuff?
I don't think resistant in the sense of the right commercial establishments coming to the city of Apopka. During my 6 years on council, I don't think I've ever heard a complaint about a commercial business coming into town outside of the evil three, right? I say evil three, not my words. Population stores,
sure.
The dollar stores, the auto parts stores, and the fast food restaurants, right?
But it's all about. I like the idea that we're trying to avoid just more and more and more of those. Though.
Yeah, but again, it's a testament to it's the right one versus I'm against all of them. Like case in point, this Culver's just opened up. I mean, I think those types of brands, they're good for here because what they're consistent. They've got good quality, good customer service, and that shows that people like to go, because fast food restaurants always comes with a caveat. Only if it's a Chick-fil-A, right?
Right.
Like they don't care. I hate fast food, but by the way, if it's Chick-fil-A, that's the exception.
A little fun fact is I read a whole big thing on them. They are like the smallest franchise and the most profitable at the same time, which is insane.
It's amazing. I mean, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're wrapped around 3 or 4 times.
It's that cow that's saying eat more chicken.
But again, but in the meantime, again, I think it's all, and especially probably the intent of this show is to highlight some of those smaller brands.
It really is, yes.
Which is really the backbone of any good community.
Yes.
I mean,
so I said Outback just because as a kid, I remember thinking that, but we are all about the small business. We'd much rather see a small business come in than a big chain.
Yeah. I mean, because right across from that area that you're talking about, right, is Ed Conlin's place, the Backroom Steakhouse.
Oh, we just went there for the first time, believe it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
amazing.
I mean, it's just as good a quality. I would argue that the environment, the ambiance or whatever you want to call it, equates to any good steakhouse that you would go to. So you've got options there. Yeah. I mean, and I could list off a whole bunch of.
But finding, that's another one. I didn't even know it was there. So this goes kind of back to how do you target your audience, because apparently it's been there for a very long time. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And again, and I saw where the chamber's doing something around like Passport to Apopka. So hopefully maybe that's their grand plan there, is to really come up with a map of all these places, or a passport or incentive for people to go out and visit these kind of smaller family brands.
Yeah. Like some of the, like what does Orlando do? They do something where you buy a ticket and it's like a foodie event.
Oh, it's like 30 for 30 or something.
They got Magical Dining Month.
That thing.
Yeah, but something, and I know some of our businesses
cool,
here,
right?
some of our restaurants here participate in that.
Yeah. Or it's like a sample you get from each one or something.
Yeah, a certain amount or certain meal or something. Yeah. But I do I love to see a mixture of both. You know, you always need something fast. You know, you got to get fast food every once in a while. So you need a good mixture, a healthy balance, right?
Well, and you hit the nail on the head on that one, right? It's not about any one thing being bad or better than the other. Yeah. It's a lot of times people get this exhaustion because there's one type of thing that comes and it's so repetitive. So
it seems like it keeps being the thing that's popping up.
Let's take dollar stores for whatever reason.
Let's beat them up. I'm okay with that.
If that's all you ever hear, then you start to get this like fatigue about it. I'm like, oh gosh, not another one.
Yeah.
But if
I can see one from the other one.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like.
Yeah. So if you get away from the high concentration of any one thing and you have a very balanced mixture, I think that's the idea, right? Is you're really trying to balance it all out.
But what draws a business like that in? Is it like the median income in an area? Yeah. What is it that really drives them to a specific area?
Yeah, and I think I work in banking. We can probably talk shop around IT stuff because I've been more on the software development side. And so when you're developing product,
when you guys talk shop, can I go take a nap?
Yeah. But when you develop something, let's call it a widget. In the restaurant world, it's a specific cuisine. If it's in retail, it's a certain consumer product. If it's in software, it's a certain application that you're trying to sell. But let's just call it a widget for the sake of example. When you're developing that widget, you just don't start making it with the idea of trying to profit on it without knowing anything else. You're saying, what problem am I trying to solve?
Yeah.
Is there already market saturation of people trying to solve that same problem in the area that I want to go into? Mm-hmm. Is there a market for people to buy it within the area that I'm going into? And is that sustainable over a long period of time? Is there a growth strategy? Or is this population pretty much built out? So I could argue like city of Altamont Springs, again, where I was born and raised, they're built out. I mean, their population is not going to change all that much. It may even decline on certain years.
Yeah, there's no room. There's no.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so from a house,
we have plenty of room.
Right. So when you look at households right now, city of Altamont Springs has about 19,000 households. City of Apopka has 17,000. Well, that's not going to stay that way for very long.
Right.
I mean, we're going to surpass that mark.
Lots of room for growth here.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so when you think about opportunity, demand, things like that, we're just a hotbed of opportunity out here, both existing right now, but also over the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be a very good environment for that. When you look at, but you also have to look at the disposable income of folks too.
Yeah.
If you're a good capitalist, you're trying to make as much money as you can doing what you're doing. And then you look at a city of Apopka. We've got, I think our median household income as the last census was like 69,000. Which is good. I mean, it's better than some areas. But it's actually lower than both Ocoee and Winter Garden at this point.
Oh,
which took me by surprise as well.
Me too, because I mean, I know a lot of people where I work live in Apopka, so I guess that goes back to the whole how dispersed and spread out Apopka is.
Well, we are.
Yeah.
Again, if you talk about dispersed, people per square mile, ours is like half of what some of the other cities around us are. It's crazy. But
you can still drive around in Apopka and be like in the country, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
Which is
it's nice, kind of.
That's what people come out here because of. I mean, but you have a lot of, and again, we were talking about before the show is, like I said, I grew up in Altamont Springs, but you don't get that sense of community like you do in Apopka.
Yeah.
Apopka is multi-generational. Mm-hmm. The people that are still tied to some of the original families of Apopka, Apopka exudes its history. You can feel it, and it makes it very different.
We were just talking about that with Apopka, and Apopka is really supportive of their own. I mean, like
very much so. And so you have this constant struggle there too, because I represent kind of the newer Apopka, because
you're still an Apopkan, though, is what I mean.
But I mean, I grew up right next door.
Yeah.
But I moved to Apopka with my wife back in 2006. It was right around the height of the bubble, the housing bubble, because the existing inventory for a newlywed couple was not realistic anywhere else. And Apopka was nice because, we had grown up coming through here in Apopka. My aunt lived here.
Sure.
And so we thought it was affordable to come out here, build a new house. We still live in that same house. But that's what you're still seeing. Apopka is still fairly affordable for new up and coming professional families. And as their family grows, hey, we've got great, youth athletics, activities, parks and recs, but they also want to tie that out with, the shopping and the dining and stuff like that, because
it's almost growing with you in a way.
Yeah. Because you want to be able to have those family moments and not have to travel, 20, 30 minutes outside of town to do that. And, the more opportunity, and it's not to say that we can't in Apopka. I don't want to come across as doom and gloom, because that's not the case. But the more opportunities you provide, it's the better that it is. I joke, but it's more like sympathy joke versus funny haha joke. But I've always said that like the endangered species in Apopka is like the 20-something crowd. Like you go to high school here, you may go off to college or start your job or what have you, but you really don't see them coming back necessarily directly to Apopka, because we don't afford all of those opportunities that, something, a little bit bigger might be able to offer.
And there's those of us that never left. So
and there's a lot.
There is a lot of families that it's, like you said, multi-generational.
I just want to say
yours is one of them.
For the Apopka Art and Foliage Festival, if I can say this right. So I was selling my novels there. I was at author booth, which is not common. I don't think they said they'd ever had an author. Mm-mm. I had other artists who've been to some of the supposedly more fancy, and they said, you're not going to sell anything. And Apopkins, like I said, will support Apopkins. And I'm a local author, and I almost sold out of books. Wow. So I did sell out of one title.
Did. Yeah.
So I was like, wow, this is amazing. They were even more especially interested when they found out I'm from Apopka and I'm still here. So that loyalty to their own community, our own community, that's something I don't think you would know better than we do, but I don't think you see that everywhere. I don't feel it everywhere.
You don't. I think you get a little bit of maybe Winter Garden and Akoi, because a lot of those families, a lot of them are tied to the citrus or agricultural businesses, and they've just stayed homesteaded there for a few generations. And I think that what makes it unique. But like I said, in Altamont, I never got that sense. My mom still lives in the same house I grew up in. It's just, you didn't see that.
Yeah. Definitely. You don't feel that when you go to that area.
Yeah.
You can feel it. Like you said, you feel it in some areas when you're there. It's just.
Yeah. And I would encourage your reader or your listeners to, visit the Apopka Museum, the Museum of the Apopkins.
We haven't even done that. Yeah. We really want to go do that too.
We have it on our list.
It's a great resource. It really is. There's a lot of good stuff that really highlights our history.
Yeah.
And we need to do it here because we do that every single other town we go to. Mm-hmm.
It's like you don't do it in your own town. You go to another town.
You go to the other town,
but you never think
about the railroad that came right through Winter Garden. There's railroad that goes through Apopka.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was telling you before. I did a kind of a guest speaker role for a college class recently, and it's really interesting to know the history of Apopka. Again, the lodge building where our founding charter documents were signed is still there. And our original borders were 1 mile northeast, south, and west of that particular building.
Oh, wow.
And so that's still there. And then all these, going back from, the original settlers of Lake Apopka, the Seminole Indians and some of these other tribes. And then you see our evolution of industry, whether it was logging and the lumber mills. Mm-hmm. You had citrus, you had cattle ranch, turpentine.
Wow.
Weird.
For varnish and stuff like that. It's just, it's like one led to the other. As you're clearing land for logging purposes, you create pastures for cattle ranching. When you still have your pines, you can extract turpentine. When cattle ranching, you can plant citrus groves on there. And then ultimately, when citrus was so temperature sensitive, then they realized, hey, the indoor foliage, and it really started with the fern industry. And then that evolved into, the different varieties of indoor foliage. But, you see over time how Apopka has evolved.
And one thing becomes another. One industry. There's a big fishing town as well.
Bass fishing, Al Capone and Clark Gable fished on Lake Apopka.
That explains the Al Capone house that we drive past all the time.
There's 2 Al Capone houses in Mount Plymouth.
Well, yeah, he golfed up at them. Used to be a golf course up there and a big hotel up there as well.
Yeah.
So,
and then that hotel, I believe, became like an academy or something.
The Boys
like
Academy. I remember that when we were kids and we were teenagers. We used to go into it in the middle of the night.
Yeah, we used to, go destroy stuff and spray paint stuff.
You did. I did.
Things you're not supposed to do.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Whatever.
But it's really interesting because a lot of people, like we were talking about multi-generation, it's not just the people that were the landowners or ag business owners. You're a lot of people that worked the farms, the muck farms on the North Shore of Lake Apopka, that really put the blood, sweat, and tears into making sure that we thrived as a city and we're able to be sustainable.
Yeah, we definitely have to go by there and do that because that would be
sounds interesting.
I mean, we kind of got a little mini lesson right here.
I know.
Now, so
I do want to.
Cool.
I do want to go see. I grew up in the era when the foliage, indoor foliage, was still really thriving. My parents had a large nursery. They ended up pivoting to landscaping when the nursery business started dying. They were doing like all of Syntex homes at one point. So, I'm well versed in the. I mean, I worked in that greenhouse for 4 or 5 years as a kid. Mm-hmm. So, and it was everybody's parents. It seemed like had a nursery or uncle had a nursery. Yeah. They were everywhere. That was the big thing back then.
Yeah, it was. During my time on council, I served as a board member for Lake Apopka Natural Gas, and of course, the ag businesses use those natural gas during cold months to make sure that their
plants stay. We had the
alive.
Heaters. We had those big heaters. Yeah.
But it's really kind of cool to see their system. Like I was good friends with Wayne Mercer with Mercer Botanicals, Amerigo Farms. If you ever get a chance to go up and tour their facility, I mean, you think agriculture indoor, a greenhouse and some plants and some
cutting
soil.
Edge now, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, I mean, high tech stuff. They know when humidity is going to change to a certain point and they can automatically close or open, or the temperatures when it's going to rain. I mean, it's amazing.
Things have come a long way from my dad getting up at 3 a.m. because it's going to freeze and running out to the greenhouse to manually fire up the heaters and freaking out because one of them will come on, all that, those old days.
It's a set it and forget it kind of.
Yeah, that's amazing. This is back in the fiberglass greenhouse days, if that tells you anything. Yeah. So,
are you aging yourself? Oh, you just said your age anyway.
Yeah.
So you don't really care. I do have something I always wonder about is, every time you see like an old building that like there's nothing in it, it's vacant. Something that like Propagate and 3 Odd Guys have done is gone into an older building, really fixed it up, and gave it that charm that it needs. Mm-hmm. Is there like incentives for businesses to to rent or lease or buy an existing building and kind of turn it in,
Yeah, so it depends on where you're at in the city. But our downtown area, which is our CRA district, Community Redevelopment Act district.
Okay.
So there's monies that are collected and put into that fund to fund programs like that because we want to address blight in areas around our city to make sure that we can revitalize those, make them look, like they should. Yeah. So there are funds earmarked for those purposes. So if a business wanted to open up on a place that might have blight, we've got monies earmarked for them to do facade upgrades or make sure that cosmetically it looks sound, as well as making sure that it's safe for them to operate and for patrons to visit them.
Okay.
So for clarity, what's blight?
So really just a rundown.
Is that what that is?
Dilapidated kind of state of a building.
I got you. So I wondered we drive through Apopka sometimes, and it's been changing over the years, but you can still see in between the newer stuff, you kind of still see some of the history in there, some of the older buildings in there. So if I'm hearing you right, some of that stuff is sort of funding those old buildings to get upgrades and to look more modern and more...
Yeah, or just maybe not even look more modern, but just stabilize them, harden them, making sure that they're structurally sound and they look like they're open and ready for business kind of establishment. Yeah. Because again, there's a lot of architectural significance in how buildings look too.
Sure.
People want to be prideful of that as well.
Oh, of course. So, I lived in downtown Sanford once. I know all about you can't build whatever you want kind of thing.
And
if there's like a district that wants to stay with
and we've got design standards both from a downtown overlay, like Kelly Park Crossing, which is where the new Publix is at. It's called the Kelly park form-based code. So what design standards are permissible and things like that.
Oh, for the facade of all those buildings.
Yeah, for new construction.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're all consistent looking throughout.
That's the idea.
And I've always thought that's important because, like, when you are driving through, if somebody visits here, then they drive through a part of town and there's all these, businesses that are closed, and you get that sense of, what's going on? Where's a good spot to go? So because I think you think of that when you think of abandoned buildings or just things that are kind of sitting without any businesses thriving in them.
Yeah,
So.
I love watching shows where they just bring back to life.
Yes.
So do
Things
I.
that are, I forget what's that show in Laurel, Mississippi, or something. My Hometown, or something like that. Or
Oh, now we're gonna have to watch it.
I forget what the name of the show is. A big guy with a big beard and his blonde wife. I can't think. I think
And they just
They restore old
home
buildings?
renovations.
they take old homes that were built in the 20s, 30s, and just revitalize them for the new homeowners.
And you're
So-
probably just like, what the heck? Who has this kind of imagination, right?
Yeah. Well, Kyle, it's been very nice chatting with you. Anything else you want to chat with us about before we wrap up?
No, I love doing what I'm doing. I get back in the seat in November. But yeah, I take a great amount of pride in serving the city of Apopka just because of the uniqueness that we've discussed over the last few minutes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a microcosm of all the things that you can do for a city. Right here.
Yeah.
We're a diverse city. We're a growing city. There's a lot of demands from an infrastructure, government perspective. So each month is different. Each week is different, it seems like.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting.
It's
And
ever evolving, so
Yeah.
that makes it not boring too,
Yeah.
right?
And we're
It's exciting to be in that seat because you're being a part of it, but you're seeing it happen.
Yeah, and we're a very family-based community too. I mean, I've got my
Very
wife, and then
much.
I've got 3 daughters myself. One in high school, one in middle school, one in elementary school. And
Oh my God!
wow.
You
You're
never
just
sleep.
sprawled out here.
I want to create that city where we just have, a evolving life cycle of
You have
interest.
something for
us.
all of them to
Exactly.
do for throughout the years too, and to maybe come back to
Absolutely.
as well. Well, Kyle, thank you so much. I learned a lot today.
I did too. Super interesting. And we are absolutely going to go down to the museum.
we're
We
going
are
to put that
absolutely
on the
gonna do that.
calendar because we've been saying it's been on the calendar, but
Please do, and
so
if you do,
it's on the list.
call me up and I'll join you. And
Oh, cool.
Oh, we'll do that for
yeah,
sure.
we'd love to.
Awesome.
We'd
All
love
right,
to.
guys. Well,
And even invite somebody that's probably even more knowledgeable than I am. Although the staff at the museum is just a wealth of knowledge as well. So
Yeah, that'd be very cool. And, I mean, just from what I've seen in my own lifetime in the development, I know my dad's from Apopka, my grandfather's from Apopka. So, we've been here for several generations too. And it would be neat to see. I remember seeing like the old high school my dad went to, and it was like a relatively small building. So it's like, or maybe it was my grandfather that went to it. But just in our 3 generations, there's been some dramatic change and growth throughout the city. So I want to go
I know
find
every
out more
time we
about it.
go down a paved road that used to be dirt, he tells me
still-
about it.
The old man thing. This used to be dirt when I was there. Used to be woods.
right.
The dadism. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning into the show. Thanks again to Kyle once again for
Yes.
joining us and teaching us some things here. And as always, guys, we just appreciate each and every time you tune in and help us support our community.
Indeed, we do.
We love doing it. It's what we'll be doing it this upcoming weekend at an event. But this will air afterwards, so I always do that.
Yeah.
There's an event this weekend. I
So
know.
we had
Oh,
a
you
great
know.
time
You
at
know,
that
she knows.
event. We had a great time at that event.
Yeah, we had a good time at the event that we went to this weekend. But anyway, guys, if you want to help support the show, you can do that by going to
Patreon, and I'm not going to bore everyone by saying the link like
Go
I
to the
normally
link.
do. Just scroll down, and in the show notes or on the YouTube video, you'll see a link where you can help support the show by donating either $1, $3, or $5 a month. That helps us with things like hosting the website, hosting the videos, the background music, and all the production that goes into the show. And for those of you that are already our patrons, we can't thank you enough. I'm still looking at the camera that we don't use anymore, so it's going to take a while to get used to.
That's right, guys. And remember, at the end of each and every day,
It's all fine and dandy. Stop doing that. Like,
What? You are looking at the camera. I think I was too.